Hello everyone, this is Jim Childers again with episode 4 this time of a series of videos that are intended to encourage you to use listening excerpts as you try to grow and develop your band students. This series of videos also demonstrates tables from a resource book entitled Listening Excerpts to Develop Band Musicianship. That resource is available from GIA Publications. If you go to giamusic.com, you'll be able to find it. I would like to mention that in episodes 1 and 2 of this video series, I share a lot of information that's intended to help you to be more efficient. Information about amplification, information about storing and retrieving your listening examples, and it also shares information about how you can download for free recordings of the President's Own, the top Marine Corps band stationed out of Washington, D.C., for free, one of the best bands in the world. So let's continue on with the video. Today's video, we're going to deal with the concept or the table entitled Diminuendo and Release or Lifting Release. And this comes from a cluster of tables entitled Expressive Elements Micro. And by micro, I mean very specific. In this grouping of tables, there are very specific moods. For example, there is heroic. There's a table entitled chaotic or frenzied. There is grand. You can check out the table of contents and see a more detailed listing of all that is there. It also deals with very specific processes that your students will use to make their music more expressive. As I mentioned, today we're going to deal with lifting releases, but there's also things in there about sudden dynamic changes, dynamic swells, use of rubato, stretching the ends of phrases. Once again, check out that table of contents. I would like to mention that this grouping of tables is definitely the group that I use the most in rehearsals. All right, so let's get going with today's demonstration. Our scenario for this one, you could use this in a full band rehearsal, you could use this in a sectional rehearsal, but for us, we're going to pretend it's a private lesson. And I can recall using this once with a student who plays the trumpet. We'll say that her name is Cadence. Now, Cadence was a very competent and a very skilled player, and Cadence and I, in her lessons, had been working on some etudes, excuse me, that she needed to prepare for an audition. And of course, she had her notes and her rhythms, and everything was going very well, but I wanted her to add just a bit more expression, a bit more artistry, and just make more of what she was playing. So we're in a lesson, and we're dealing with some things, and I know she can do a better job with how she is releasing notes and releasing phrases. And so I thought, you know, I should have her listen to something. And for you, if you were in this situation, you might pick up the resource book that you have there on your shelf, or maybe it's sitting on your desk. And having looked through the table of contents before, you would have spotted a table or two that you thought might be useful, and let's say you recall that table's in there. So you go to the table of contents and you're like, okay, where was that diminuendo and release or lifting release table? And you go, okay, there it is, and you find the page number. And so then you thumb over to where that table is located and you start to skim through there, and you're looking for recordings that you have, pieces that you like. And maybe you notice that in this table I have the word exemplary over to the right. So you're like, oh yeah, that would be a good one. I would like to mention something that might be very valuable to you as you pull out excerpts for your kids to use. If you'll take a piece of paper and just fold, I know this is really high tech. If you'll take a piece of paper and fold it up, what I have noticed that I will do is I will find a piece that I want to use, and then I will start to type it into my MacBook, and I'll lose sight of where that example's at. And if it doesn't start right at the beginning, you need to know the timestamp where you're going to start it. So what you can do is you can set that bookmark, that makeshift bookmark right there, and when the page closes and you set it down, I'm going to use an example from Fire of Eternal Glory, and you start to type that in the search window, and you're like, okay, there it is, and you pull it up, and you're like, what was that timestamp again? Then whenever you grab a hold of that and open that up, you can be, oh, 1:36. That's where I need to start that. So remember also, I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place today. But there are 3 steps to help your listening examples to have a greater impact on your students. Step 1 is focus their attention. Step 2 is use some gestures. And then thirdly, you want to give them some technical advice. So I would say something to Cadence about, hey, listen for their ends of notes. Listen to how they end their phrases and how it's not just arbitrary. It has a greater beauty to it. And so then I would get this thing rolling. And I know I need to get over to 1:36. So then I'm going to get it and drag it over there. And I stop short of the 1:36 point, letting her absorb some of the sounds. I'm using some gestures. Now I can tell you that Cadence was not hacking off the ends of notes. Cadence was not doing anything harsh with what she was playing before. But by getting her to just add those little subtle releases that showed a greater level of professionalism, it really paid off for her in the particular honor band that was a statewide organization that she was applying for. She ended up getting second chair, and I'm really confident that those little touches helped her to get a higher chair, because everybody at that festival was a great player. It's just you, like I, want to help your students get to that next level. And for her, it was just doing something a little bit more sensitive with the ends of those phrases. So right there, she could hear not just great tone, great beauty, great direction in the phrase, but also how just the use of silence and how she released her notes made it that much better. I wanted to add in just a couple more chunks of advice for you guys before we let this episode come to a close. The third step in helping your listening examples have a greater impact is to give technical advice. Sometimes I think it's okay if you don't necessarily give them the technical advice right away. I know with Cadence was a very talented musician, and so after I played the example for her, I let her just try it within the etudes that she was working on. And Cadence was able to imitate, emulate what she had heard in the recording and add that to her pieces without me talking a lot about what she was doing with her air. With your students, I would recommend that as well, because sometimes, you can just get loaded down with too much technical thought in your mind, and sometimes you can just let yourself do it. Works better. If your students are struggling and they're not quite getting it, well then yes, you can listen more. You can also speak more specifically about what's happening with that air column. How quickly is that going to disappear? If you hear them inserting some tongue to the teeth, well that would be bad. So you can definitely speak about that. But sometimes withholding the technical advice might be the best pedagogy. Now, one other thing I'd like to mention, we're talking a lot about how these listening examples can help your students, but I would like to tell you that by listening to great quality music, well-written music, played by outstanding ensembles, I think that is really good for you directors as well. If you teach in Utopia, USA, and you have a huge wealth of talent in front of you every day, you may not understand what I'm getting ready to say, but the majority of us, we leave work some evenings, some days, and we're frustrated or we're exhausted, and we don't feel, exactly great about how that day's rehearsals went, or it's just we're burnt out a little bit. And so by listening to great music by great bands, it can lift your spirits. It can recharge your batteries. It can help you to be motivated the next time you're in front of kids. And I have enjoyed listening to the great bands of the world and this country. And I think it will lift you up too. So take care of yourselves as well as your students. And I just want to say good luck. And I hope to see you again in the next episode.